Hey everyone, welcome back to the next part in our Python for Daily Fantasy Sports series. In today's video, we're going to be going over a more in-depth look at web scraping using a new Python package called Selenium. If you remember from our Beautiful Soup video, Beautiful Soup did a very good job of navigating to a specific URL and pulling information directly off of that page. But where Beautiful Soup is going to struggle is if there is something that needs to be done on that page, whether it is clicking on something or typing something in, that cannot be accounted for in the web URL. For instance, if you want to navigate to Google and type into a search box, that's not something Beautiful Soup can do. If you are getting statistic tables, maybe box scores, something like that, and the default table that pops up is going to be maybe only the last 50 records of the table. In that case, you would need to navigate to that web page and be able to either select to view more than the top 50 records, or be able to iterate through each page and pull out that information. That is where Selenium is going to come into play, because it is actually going to spin up a remote web browser that you'll be able to control with Python, and you can do all of these things and interact with the web page just like you would with your mouse or keyboard. However, it is going to be a little bit more complex to get up and running than a simple pip install Selenium. You do need to still do a pip install Selenium, but we also need to get a web driver downloaded. Now, depending on what browser you're using, it's going to vary on which web driver you want to use. I personally, for this purpose, use Mozilla Firefox as my web browser, so I will need to download the Gecko Driver web driver. Now, if you use a different browser or you want to use a different browser to control remotely, that's perfectly fine. I'll have links in the description on where to go to find that information for your browser, and you will follow the same steps that I do here. You'll just want to make sure to get the right driver. And then when you're actually using Selenium, where I'm instructing Python to open an instance of Firefox, you're going to want to be opening an instance of whichever browser you're using. But the core concepts are going to be the exact same. So, without further ado, let's get started. All right, so if you recall from our Beautiful Soup tutorials, the most important first step we have when introducing a new package in Python is to review the documentation. So, we're going to do a quick Google search for Python Selenium Documentation. And we have a couple options here. Read the Docs is going to be a third party that kind of puts together and goes over the documentation. We want to go straight to the Selenium.dev documentation though. And now this is going to look a little bit scary, I'm sure. Not nearly as friendly as our landing page for the Beautiful Soup documentation was. Zoom in some here. But up here in the top left, you have Selenium 3.14 documentation. We're going to go ahead and click on that, and that's going to bring us to the more of a functional landing page for the documentation. So as we can see here, we've got install instructions. Here's where we're going to be going over the drivers that you can go through, and then some examples. So we're just going to kind of start by walking through this page. First off, you're going to want to pip install Selenium. I already have mine installed, but just as a refresher, if you pip install Selenium and run that, it will install the actual Selenium package that you need. Notice mine, it's already satisfied. So yours will run through the install process though, and I'll drop a link up top for my Welcome to Python video where I review pip installs and how they work and what they do, for a refresher there. Now, for the complex aspect of getting this up and running is the actual web driver that we need to download. So like I said before, I'm using Firefox for this, so I need the Gecko Driver. If you want to use Safari, Edge, or Chrome, there's different instructions here where to go to get the download. I know Firefox works simply and easily. I've never used it with another browser, so I can't speak to that. If you're using it with another browser and you're running into problems, I would suggest that you use Firefox instead. One common error you can run into once you start doing this type of coding is you will need to be up to date on both the most recent browser version as well as the most recent driver version. So let's say you get everything set up today with Firefox and Gecko Driver, and 6 months from now you want to do a different program that uses Selenium. You may run into errors, and it could be as simple as you just need to update the versions, download the newest Gecko Driver, and make sure Firefox is up to date. So that is something you'll need to keep an eye on. But just for getting our driver here, we're going to go through the Firefox example with Gecko Driver. So that link's going to take us to the GitHub page for Gecko Driver. And they're going to give you, so if you've never been on GitHub before, if it's well documented, they'll kind of tell you what they've done in the most recent update, any known issues they have, and what they've fixed. What we're concerned with right now is downloading the Gecko Driver itself. So for me, I'm on a 64-bit Windows system, so I'm going to download this. If you're on Mac or Linux or a 32-bit Windows system, then you're going to want to download whatever's the most relevant for you. So we want to look at that download, and as you can see, I've already downloaded it once today to make sure everything worked. But we have the download zip. We'll need to put this in our path variable. So if you want to go ahead and extract it now, you can do it right there in your downloads if you want. It's not important where you extract it, but you will need to move this elsewhere to be able to use it. So now that we have the extracted file that we're going to be using, we need to get to our system path variable. Now, if you have, you will need administrator privileges to be able to look that up on your machine. If you don't have administrator privileges and you're on a machine where it's not possible to get them, to find your path variable, then you can just copy and paste this geckodriver.exe into the same file directory that you save your code in. But it has to be in the same folder where that code is at, otherwise it's not, the Python is not going to be able to find it when you try to run it. But if you have a new folder with new code in it and you need to use Selenium again, you're going to have to copy and paste it into that folder as well. And do that each and every time going forward. If you can put it in your path variable for your machine, you only have to do it once, and Python is going to be able to check that location every time. So if we don't have administrator privileges, we're going to take this and we're going to copy it, and we are going to go, I don't know, wherever we have our so I've got a bunch of Python IPy notebooks here, and I should have some .pys down here. So if I wanted to just run everything out of this old archive folder, I could copy and paste Gecko Driver in, and as you can see, Gecko Driver is already there. So I'm going to skip this file and not do it because it's already there. And this doesn't matter what I'm doing here because this is all old anyways. But as you can see, Geckodriver.exe, I already had November 3rd, 2019 in that folder. Now, to add it to your path variable, if you have administrative privileges, and again, this is the preferred method because it only needs to be done one time. If you're on Windows, you're going to need to go to About Your PC, and then you need to go to System Info under Related Settings in the top right, then Advanced System Settings. Okay, it's got that little yellow and blue shield there. That means you need administrative privileges to do it. I am the administrator on this machine, so that's not a problem for me. Then when we open our system properties, we're going to have this button here, Environment Variables. Okay, now be very careful when you're doing anything with administrative privileges, because that anything that is locked behind administrative privileges, you probably run the risk of messing something up significantly on your machine. So if you're not comfortable doing this, then definitely just keep copy and pasting it into your local directories. Otherwise, we're going to come here and we're going to look at variable, path, and we're going to see where that folder is. All right, so for me, and it's probably going to be similar on most Windows systems, unless you are on like a work machine that your IT is controlling things, that might be a little bit different. But as far as just regular home computers, your C drive is typically going to be where Windows is installed, your users, your username. App data is a hidden folder, so I'll show you in a minute how to view hidden folders. But once you get an app data, local Microsoft Windows apps is going to be pretty common. So if we want to go to there, we'll do this PC. Then we'll do, there we go. So this PC, then my C drive. Then we have users. Then my user. Now here's where app data is going to be a hidden folder. So you can see right here that it's kind of grayed out, like it's very clearly darker than the other options. So is Microsoft Edge backups. That's because those are both hidden files. So if you can't see those on your machine, come up top here where it says view. And then there should be a little button under show hide for hidden items. So if I uncheck that, app data is gone now. It disappeared. Because hidden items is unchecked, which means we're not showing hidden items. If I check mark it, then it will show me the hidden items, and then I can get to app data. Then we want to do local. And we want to do Microsoft. And we want to do Windows apps. And here we go. As you can see, I have Gecko Driver installed right here. And all you have to do, make sure you extract it first. Make sure you're not just double clicking into the compressed folder and copying it out, because it's compressed down. You're not getting the full file there. So you want to extract it to a normal folder. And then we could just copy and paste this here. And now that Python is going to be able to read that every single time that we go and try to run Selenium. So that's the complex part about getting Selenium up and running. And again, assuming that you have administrative privileges, it's a one and done scenario. It's not something that you have to be doing over and over again. You just have to do it the one time and put it in your path variable. Otherwise, you are going to be stuck copying and pasting it to each local file directory that you're saving your Python code in. And then, God forbid, when you need to update it to a new version, you're going to have to go and update it in every single one of those. As I'm sure you can imagine there, having it to replace it in one spot is going to be much better than replacing it in 1, 3, 5, 50, 100 spots. It just depends on how many different folders you're going to have. So, now that we have our WebDriver installed and we have Selenium installed, let's run through a couple of quick examples so I can show you how this works in this video. Let's see how zoomed in we can get over here. Not that zoomed in. Okay, that should work. That looks legible still. So, let's start with example 0. And we're just going to go over some real quick here. Just so you can kind of see what's going on. So I'm honestly just going to copy and paste over from here and talk you through it. So you may notice that this import statement looks a little bit different than what we've done before. So what we're doing here is we're not importing the entire Selenium package when we do this. We are only importing the WebDriver subpackage from Selenium, because we don't need all of Selenium. It's going to be a little bit easier on the memory of the computer. It's going to be a little more efficient if you're only importing what you need. So if we do from Selenium import WebDriver, then our browser, where we're defining a variable here called browser, equals WebDriver.Firefox. So let me comment this line out so we can see what this looks like. If we just run that, we should get, yep, here we go. We should get a Firefox instance spun up that is if you're familiar with Firefox, you might notice that this address bar looks a little bit different than normal, with the two-tone gray coming across in that design. That means that the browser is being controlled remotely. If we want to uncomment this now, so starting browser, we're making the variable browser equal the WebDriver instance of Firefox, so a remote controlled instance of Firefox. Browser.get is going to send us to this web page in this browser. So if I run this again, It should open a new instance of Firefox. Yep. And this one is taking us to selenium.dev. So you can see it in action. We're going to run these separately. We're going to get our Firefox instance up, which again, you can see down here, no Firefox, Firefox. And now we're going to send that browser to this website. And there you go. Now you've got your little robot up here to let you know the browser's under remote control. And that's how you get to a website with Selenium. So now, let's look at the next example here, example 1. So, we have our same initial import here, but now we have a new one. So, from selenium.webdriver.common.keys, import keys. Now you may think to yourself, well, I thought we already imported WebDriver, so why are we importing something from something we've already imported? And that's a good question. The answer to that is, if we didn't import this as keys, then every time we wanted to use keys, instead of just typing in keys with a capital K, we would have to type in webdriver.common.keys.return. So you can also use it as just a tool to make your code look better, as long as you're not ambiguous in how you do it. So that's basically just providing a shortcut to this module. So we do our same deal, browser equals webdriver.firefox. And we already have a browser, so we can comment that out and use our same browser here. We don't need to establish a new browser. So what are we doing? We're going to yahoo.com, and this assert Yahoo in browser title is basically just confirming that Yahoo is in the browser title, or the title of that browser, that web page. So that's a tool you can use just to make sure you're in the right space. Especially like what we're doing side by side, do one, look at it, do one, look at it. You don't really need that because you can see what you're doing over here. However, if you have a long automated process with different URLs, in case those URLs change, those can be nice to stick in just so you can double check and make sure that what you have is correct. Selenium is also very popular in testing different sites. So if you're creating a website of your own and you need to test a bunch of different things about the site to make sure it's meeting your requirements, you could write a Python script that can test specific instances and specific elements of your website to make sure that it's running the way that you want it to. So what we're doing down here, you can see in the example, they've nicely put a comment in for us to find the search box. So elem equals browser.find element by name p. Well, that sounds kind of familiar. If you recall from our beautiful soup tutorial, we were inspecting the elements of a web page, and we briefly went over the different attributes. So why don't we go ahead and comment U3 out and run that. I'm just going to move you guys to a new cell. So as you can see, we've got yahoo.com in our browser window, and we've double checked, and Yahoo is in fact in the browser title. Now, let's take a look at this down here. Elem equals browser.find element by name p. Okay. So we know that we're finding the search box. It tells us that in the tutorial comment. So let's find the search box, and just like for beautiful soup, we're going to right click, inspect element. All right. Now let's make that a little bit bigger and get that out of here. So we know we're on the search box now because, again, when we right click inspect element, it takes us straight there. And as we're looking at this, we notice name equals p, and we are find element by name. Name is one of the variables for that element. So as you might guess or hope, you can search and find elements by a couple different things. This example is by name. Going through the documentation, there are several other methods in which you can find variables. The XPath is a common one. So if we find what we have, we can right click, copy, XPath. That's typically what I do. But again, you can do name, especially if you're like looking for a table, you can find all the tables. We did that with Beautiful Soup. But for Selenium, we are looking for something specific to interact with. So we need to make sure we find that specific thing, and we know that the name is P. So we run that and we find it, and we assign that search box to the variable name lm. Our next step here, lm.sendKeys Selenium HQ plus keys.return. Okay, so you may have been wondering what this keys module is that we're doing. Basically, we're sending the ability to use our keyboard on the website here. So we find the search box and we're sending the keystrokes Selenium HQ plus keys.return, which is the enter button or return, depending on what you call it. So what we're doing here is we're finding the search bar, we're typing in Selenium HQ, and we're hitting enter to presumably search. So let me X out of that, and let's go ahead and run it. And sure enough, Selenium HQ, we searched, and now we have the Yahoo search results for Selenium HQ. And then one last example here, browser.quit. What that is going to do is close out this instance of the browser, so we don't have several of them up and running. And there it went. So that is how you're going to navigate the basics of Selenium. Obviously, it can be much more complex than that. But that's how we're going to look at the introduction. We know where the documentation is. If there's something specific, we can always come back to the documentation to look it up. But we've established that we can open a web browser, control it remotely, and exit it when we are done. And that's going to be the basics for Selenium. If you had any questions about anything gone over in this video, whether it's the WebDriver install or something Selenium specific, let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed the content or learned a little something today, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and drop me a like down below. And if you want to keep up to date and see what's coming in the future with Selenium Part 2 and moving on to our actual data handling and data management for Python for Daily Fantasy Sports, go ahead and hit that subscribe and notification bell, and you will always be able to stay up to date. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.